Evening, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Adrienne Molenkamp with the League of Women Voters of Athens County. Welcome to our candidate forum for the Athens mayoral race. We hope that this event provides you information for the upcoming election. The candidates running for Athens mayor are Damon Crane and Steve Patterson, and we thank both of them for making the time to be here tonight. Before we get to the main event, I do want to remind everybody to make sure you have a voting plan for this November's election. The last day to register to vote or update your address if you've moved is October 10th, next Tuesday. Early in-person voting starts the next day, October 11th. If you would like to vote by mail, you need to submit an official absentee ballot request form. And those absentee ballots begin being sent out on October 11th. And then if you want to vote in person on Election Day, that is November 7th. If you need any details about any of that, you can contact our Athens County Board of Elections. In addition to these candidate events, the League also publishes a voter guide where candidates provide written answers to questions. And so our voter guide is now available online at vote411.org. It will be published in the Athens Messenger on October 14th, in the Athens News on October 18th, and we're hoping to have it in some other local media as well. Finally, the League of Women Voters is dedicated to expanding public awareness and participation in government. We do not support or oppose candidates or political parties, but we do all sorts of community engagement from voter registration to candidate events like this. So please visit our website, athensleagueofwomenvoters.org. Check out what we're doing. Maybe consider joining and becoming a member. Anyone who is at least 16 years old is eligible to be a member. And if you appreciate these candidate events and voter guides, then consider seeing us online and making a donation to help support all of our local work. So thank you, and I will turn the event over to tonight's moderator, Catherine Jellison.
Thank you, Adrienne. First of all, let me apologize. I'm getting over a cold, so if my voice sounds a little raspy, please excuse that. I have cough drops, tissues, tea. Hopefully my voice will survive this evening. Well, let's begin. Welcome to this candidates forum. I will begin by explaining the forum procedures which each candidate agreed to in advance. Tonight's forum will include an opening statement from each candidate, a question from each of the media representatives present, questions submitted by the public, and a closing statement from each candidate. Candidates will have 2 minutes for their opening statement, 2 minutes for their closing statement, and 1.5 minutes to answer each question. There will be no rebuttals. The order for speaking will rotate, and I will indicate who speaks first. The candidates can see our timekeeper, who will indicate when the speaker has 30 seconds remaining, 10 seconds remaining, and when their time has expired. If a candidate continues speaking, I will say thank you and move on to the next speaker. Candidates are invited to share their qualifications and experience and to talk about their plans and proposals. Candidates are asked to focus on topics relevant to the stated question and to avoid personal attacks and raising issues that are unrelated to the office being sought. If they go outside these guidelines, I may stop them to remind them of these guidelines. Now, our beloved audience members, please turn off your cell phones. Please remain quiet throughout the forum. No clapping, cheering, or calling out, with the exception that after their closing statements, you may clap for both candidates in unison if you wish. We received questions by email prior to tonight's forum. We are also taking questions from our in-person audience. You are encouraged to submit questions for the candidates on the provided pieces of paper. Questions must be answerable by both candidates and must apply to issues or qualifications for this particular office. Raise your hand if you'd like another piece of paper or to have your question collected. Please make sure your questions are written legibly. All questions are reviewed by a league panel. The panel removes any questions that, 1, cannot be answered by both candidates, 2, are statements rather than questions, or 3, are duplicates of other questions. We will use as many questions as time allows, striving to cover a variety of topics. We may not have time to use every submitted question. We now begin with our opening statements, and by drawing lots, it has been determined that Mr. Crane will speak first. You have 2 minutes.
My name is Damon Crane. I've been a journalist and community organizer for the past 27 years. Here's why I want to be mayor. We've all heard the saying, there's no Democratic or Republican way to fill a pothole, yet we've also heard that all politics is local and we should think globally and act locally. So which is it? Do city politics have nothing to do with larger political struggles, or are city politics key to those struggles? I believe it's the latter, especially here in Athens. We're a city of just 24,000 people, maybe 5,000 long-term residents, yet every single decade we export 70,000 different young people all across Ohio and America, so we're not a bubble at all. We actually have a much greater impact on our larger world than any community our size, practically. The question is, what kind of impact? The vast majority of eligible Athens voters are OU students, and the vast majority of young Americans are politically progressive. 74% want abortion to be legal, 79% want marijuana to be legal. And in last year's midterm, young voters preferred Democrats over Republicans by a 28-point margin. That's why the single most important thing we can do here in Athens to push back against Republicans at the state and national levels is to create a truly democratic city with high student turnout that continuously exports tens of thousands of habitual progressive voters. But right now we have incredibly low turnout, particularly among students. And in the past 3 city election cycles, I've been the only candidate working to create student-hosted city candidate forums held on campus prior to the voter registration deadline. That's why campus forums happened in 2019 and 2021. But no such forum is happening this year because my opponent refuses to participate. We're going to talk about a lot tonight, but I submit to you that when the mayor of a college town refuses to participate in any student-hosted campus debate, even with reproductive rights on the line, even with drug policy reform on the line, even with the threat Republicans pose to our democracy, even though he claims to be a Democrat, then we already know there's a huge discrepancy between what he says and what he does. That's true on issue after issue, but in this case, what he does is squandering our community's true potential to be a force for good in the world. That's why I believe we need a new mayor.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Mr. Patterson.
Thank you. I want to start by thanking the League of Women Voters for putting on a forum, which is an unbiased forum. And I really appreciate the work that you put into hosting such an event as you do with every election. Being a mayor is about leadership. It's about knowing how to lead. It's also about recognizing that you don't have all the answers. You build a team around you of smart, independent thinking, creative, consumer or customer service oriented people to get your job done, to help you with your vision. When I took office, my vision was pretty simple. I wanted to see greater diversification of our economy. I wanted to see that we were improving our infrastructure. I wanted to see that we were creating greater outdoor recreational spaces for people. I also wanted to make sure that we were becoming the best city we possibly could when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion in the city of Athens. To a lot of those points, we were able to successfully get a whole lot of infrastructure projects done in my first 2 terms. Things like the Richland Avenue's pedestrian passageway, Stimson Avenue, the roundabout, 1804 Way. We were able to get all of my city employees trained through the National League of Cities Race, Equity, and Leadership to understand what systems of racism are, how to identify them, how we become more racial equity conscious as a service to the rest of the citizenship. We've also been doing a lot of work in the world of decarbonizing, to where we now have our 2 critical resources, water and sewer, have microgrids with solar arrays associated with them, to where we are being better stewards of taxpayer dollars, but also making sure that our critical infrastructure has a way to operate if we were to sit there and all of a sudden lose power from our coal-fired power plants. Thank you.
And you may applaud both candidates for their opening statement. It's the one time you're allowed to applaud. Okay, so now we move to the question and answer portion of the forum. Candidates will have 1.5 minutes to answer each question. And candidates, should you need a question repeated, please ask, and I will be happy to do so. We will begin with questions from our media representative, Jack Green from WOUB, and the question goes first to Mr. Patterson.
All right, and we only have a limited number of microphones, so.
Thank you. So America today is very divided, and Athens in Southeast Ohio is not immune to that divisiveness. So what will you do as mayor to lead and prioritize all people in Athens?
And that is me first. Can you repeat the question?
So America today is really divided, and Athens is not immune to that divisiveness. What will you do to prioritize and lead for all people in Athens?
That's a great question. You know, for me, I view the role of the mayor is to reach out to all sectors within your community and engage with them, establish relationships, help have our whole population help serve problems that are going on, but doing it in a civil way. You know, I'd be remiss not to say that my two 11-year-old daughters are here with us today to actually be able to watch and observe democracy and civility in process, which is a big issue these days. You know, the community of Athens is a community that is pretty forward-thinking in how we go about doing things. They're always engaging. You know, we've got 24 boards and commissions citywide, from everything from community relations to the Disabilities Commission to sustainability and environment. That keeps us together to where we're using these volunteers to help inform, but also to continue having open dialogue back and forth. You know, the critical feature is having that open dialogue and being accessible. As a mayor, I engage in so many different ways on campus and off campus, and it's always civil, constructive conversations taking place, even when we're looking at what's going on at the state level and at the national level with so much, you know, negativity that's going on out there. It's you know, I look at myself and I go, my job is easy, quite honestly.
I think we need to be real here. 14% of eligible voters are currently voting in city elections. 86% of our community is totally alienated from the public life of our community. The turnout tonight, I think, speaks to that. And that alienation has been bleeding into midterm elections too. You know, between 2018 and 2022, nationally, voter turnout only declined by 3%. Among young voters, it declined by 5%. Here in Athens, the number of people casting ballots declined by 35%, more than a third. And there's nothing about OU enrollment data that accounts for that. There's nothing about city population that accounts for that. Right now, the portion of our community that is actually included in public life is minuscule. So, you know, if we want to talk about bringing people together, we've got to get past that. That's my priority. And, you know, 3/4 of our population are OU students. We need to be reaching out to them, particularly if we want our community to have the biggest progressive impact on the wider world that it can.
Thank you. Now we have questions from the public, and our first question from the public will be answered by Mr. Crane first. Is Athens Code Enforcement's rental housing inspection program functioning properly? Why or why not? And what, if anything, should be changed?
Well, for starters, you know, I'm such a radical that I agree with the recommendations of the OU Athens City Affordable Housing Joint Task Force report of 2016. I agree with the City Comprehensive Plan of 2020 and the 2040 City Comprehensive Plan, all of which call for increasing staffing of code enforcement. Code enforcement is too understaffed right now to do its job of enforcing the code. One illustration of that. Last year, there was a ceiling collapse at a dilapidated rental on the west side. United Athens County Tenants, of which I'm a member, had done a public records request for 14 years of city code enforcement records. So we looked up all that landlord's properties. There were 17 of them in Athens. And, we found a lot of startling things about that landlord, but we also found some very startling things about code enforcement. 25% of the time, after they identified violations, they weren't coming back to do the follow-up inspection to make sure those violations were corrected. 25% of the time. This particular landlord also had a habit of dodging inspections by failing to show up for them. Every time that occurred, the city would just fine him $25, but not come back to inspect them until the next year. As a result, some of his properties went up to 8 consecutive years without showing any evidence of compliance. Yet my opponent's administration issued him a new rental permit every year, and in fact, appointed him to serve on the city zoning commission.
All right. Thank you.
We're having conversations in council right now to raise the some of the fees or fines for having to be re-inspected for inspections. The city's administration is very cognizant of the fact that we are now about to see a greater number of students who are moving off campus because they stay on for 2 years and they move on to the off-campus economy. And so we know that we need to increase the number of rental inspection officers for the city of Athens in order to accomplish the inspections of the rental units. So that's our plan moving forward, is to make sure that we have more code enforcement officers out there. The other thing that I always see with a lot of the rental units is when I'm looking around, there's a lot of rentals that clearly are not energy efficient. When I'm looking at windows that are single pane windows and the casement around them is failing. So I've been working with USDA and EPA to see if there's a way in which we can access the Inflation Reduction Act monies to create, number one, energy audits for rental units. Number two, to incentivize the landlord, because at the end of the day, who's paying the utility bill? The renter's paying it. And so if we can get better HVAC systems in those rental units, better windows in those units, better insulation in those units, better appliances, that is going to put much less burden on the renter in terms of their utility bill, plus it'll make those more efficient.
Thanks. Our next question from the public is also related to rental housing, and it goes first to Mr. Patterson. The City University Joint Affordable Housing Task Force report of 2016 states that the city allows the houses to be so run down while landlords continue to collect overinflated rent as a direct negative impact on attracting talent to the region. The Athens housing industry should be a revenue center. Instead, it hurts the town's aesthetics and appeal. Do you think landlords who habitually violate the city housing code should continue to be granted rental permits?
Simple answer, no.
Simple answer, no, but for real. The report that we did on landlord Joe Kraus found that he failed 110 out of his last 113 regular inspections at his 17 properties over a 14-year period. That's a failure rate of 97.3%. Every single one of those years, my opponent's administration continued to issue him a rental permit and appointed into the city zoning board.
All right. The next question from the public will be answered by Mr. Crane first. And it is stated thus. As WOUB and the Athens Messenger reported last year, the city code regulating towing has not been enforced in more than a decade. The administration pushed council to abolish the towing regulations in 2019 and 2022, and both times council refused, but the regulations still are not enforced. What would you do to resolve this impasse?
So this is a huge issue, and it's not just about towing. It's that we have council responsible for making legislation that then the city administration chooses to arbitrarily ignore. The city code on towing says that the city service safety director is responsible for licensing local towing operators, regulating them in several different ways, one of which is establishing fee caps for what they can charge. And the main thing that's at issue is not, when you break down and need to call AAA, but what's called public non-consensual towing. That's how the Public Utilities Commission defines it. That's when, somebody's parked illegally on a city street. Maybe they violated, the 24-hour rule, what have you. And so city police call a towing operator to tow them. Now, the fee cap is very low. It's set at like $50 for that. But the state caps it at $129. The problem is local municipalities have the right to locally regulate it, and we've got the code on the books. The administration just refuses to regulate it. And the issue isn't, well, should it be as low as $50? Well, the administration could go to council and say, hey, I think we need to raise it. Instead, the administration has just tried to abolish the regulations they refuse to enforce, and Chief Pyle was very explicit about why. He told WOUB, and I quote, oh no, time.
Oh, yes.
We'll come back to that.
Thank you.
Yeah, council has taken it up a couple times and has opted not to do anything about it. There's several issues at play here. There's people who violate the 24-hour rule. There's also towing on private properties to where that, if posted correctly, that's completely permissible. ORC speaks to that, which is why the city has been pushing council to change it. Rather than having the city regulation, it's ORC is out there that dictates it. So does the PUCO. So it's an issue that will continue. I'm sure it'll come up again through city council, and we'll continue to press them to make changes, but it's in council's hands.
Thank you. The next question goes first to Mr. Patterson. How would you seek to improve the lives of the citizens of Athens?
Multiple ways, but I think most critically right now is housing. Nationally, we're experiencing a housing crisis. Athens is experiencing a housing crisis, both affordable housing, however you want to define affordable housing, but also housing for our retiring population to retire in place into something that isn't their 2-story, 5-bedroom, 4-bath, walk-up house. So we've been working very closely with developers. There's a new program that has just come out, which is called the single family home tax credit, that we are looking to encourage developers to take advantage of in order to get more housing in the city. There's a lot of infill that can go on in the city as well. We're currently looking at a parcel that the city owns that's on Grosvenor, and possibly working with a developer to put, 5, 6, maybe 7 1,000 square foot homes on there that are equity bearing. We might deed restrict them to some degree because they're close into the university, and we know that a lot of properties end up getting flipped into rental units. Deed restrict it to where it is only owner occupied, or maybe put a time frame on that to where it has to be 10 years or greater of owner occupied and then can change. But getting to work on more housing, because we're losing faculty, we're losing staff, we're losing people who want to live here because we don't have enough housing stock.
Thank you.
I think we need a more accountable city government that fights for the 86% of people who are currently alienated from the public life of our community. If mayor, to improve the lives of that 86% and give them a reason to pay attention to city government, to have a stake in city government, I would certainly prioritize housing as well, primarily by cracking down on predatory landlords, also cracking down on predatory overcharging towing companies. I would strengthen the city housing code and its enforcement. I would increase oversight and accountability of police. I think that, there's been a lot of talk about police funding. If you just look at APD in isolation, we're spending a fairly normal amount. However, if you look that OUPD is just as big and in the same city, I think we can certainly afford to shift some of the money we're spending on policing and move it to other things to improve the lives of community members. So yeah, I think there's a lot we could do, and those would be my priorities.
Thank you. The next question goes first to Mr. Crane. Describe how you've engaged and or collaborated with people who vote like you and people who don't vote like you.
Well, the way I vote is interesting. Usually I vote for folks like my opponent. Certainly anywhere where Republican candidates are viable, I would not run and be a spoiler. And in fact, a big goal of mine running this year has been to increase turnout writ large, including among people who aren't going to vote for me. Because by my estimate, in a city where registered Democrats outnumber registered Republicans 6-1, and the vast majority of currently unregistered potential voters are progressive young people, whether somebody turns out to vote for me or against me, chances are they're going to vote yes on issue 1 and 2, and I think that's really important. I think that's been a way I've tried to impact folks who aren't going to vote like me in this election, but are going to vote for issues in the way I do. As far as reaching out to folks who are more like-minded with me, that's where I've really focused on reaching out to students, focusing on student rental housing issues, social justice issues that young people care about. That's always been a priority of mine the last 3 election cycles.
Repeat the question?
Sure. Describe how you've engaged and or collaborated with people who vote like you and people who don't vote like you.
Absolutely. I have to reflect on the pandemic. In April 4th, to be exact, of 2020, I purposely reached out to every different sector I could imagine, regardless of political affiliation, to come together because everyone was running around with their hair on fire trying to figure out what are we going to do with this pandemic that we're all having to deal with. And so I didn't look at what someone's political affiliation is. I went into mayor mode to sit there and protect our community and bring everyone together to help solve problems, solve the solution, or get solutions to what we're all having to deal with. At this present time, I was just with the Graduate Student Senate the other night, engaging with them to find out what is their chief concerns, what are the big issues they're experiencing. I engage with Student Senate, Faculty Senate. I engage with the business community here in Athens. I'm engaging with neighborhood associations. I show up. That's how I engage. And again, it's not a political thing. It's to be better informed as a mayor, to hearing what our population is experiencing. What is it? What is their chief concern? One of the things that I heard from Graduate Student Senate, transportation. Mayor, how can you improve Athens Public Transit to have service on a Sunday so I can go to the grocery store? Working on it. That's the kind of information that I find of value if you're going to engage with the communities and you use every possible mechanism that's out there, avenue to engage.
Thank you. Those of you who know me know that this is an odd request that I speak up louder because I'm usually known as having a booming voice. So you can tell I am recovering from a cold. So I've been asked to move closer to the mic. Can everyone hear me now? All right. The next question goes first to Mr. Patterson. Athens has a thriving drag scene. Republicans in many states, including Ohio, are now attempting to restrict or ban drag performances. What, if anything, have you done to oppose this?
I have spoken to representatives and senators about trying to ban something like this. To me, it's absolutely absurd and ridiculous to sit there and take away the freedoms of anybody to express themselves in any way that they choose to include having, drag performances. I find that to be something that I'm 100% behind. The city's track record in terms of protections for our LGBTQ plus community, for our trans population, in terms of making sure that things like conversion therapy for individuals age 16 or less, it's illegal in the city of Athens because of the work of city council and my signing that into law. Making sure that domestic registry is a thing, to where people who live in whatever domestic situation they live in, to make sure that they have the ability to come and register here at the community center as a family, as opposed to having to get individual memberships. I can go on and on and on with my position on that. Being the father of an individual who's openly gay and his husband, to me, this is just in my DNA to make sure I am being protective of those who are being negatively impacted, and a lot of them harmed, physically harmed. And so, I'm 100% supportive of our LGBTQ plus community, as well as, it's freedom of expression to have a drag show.
So I always try to run for office in such a way that I still advance my agenda, even if I lose the race, and good thing, right? One part of my agenda is pushing back against this bigoted Republican attack on drag, because not only has drag been part of mainstream American entertainment for the better part of a century, it's a vital queer cultural space, and to protect queer people, we've got to protect queer culture. So how could I help by running for mayor? I knew my opponent and I would not be debating whether drag should exist, so I thought, why don't we take it one step further? Why don't we embrace and honor queer culture by bringing a debate on city issues to a local drag show? So I shopped around this idea of a debate surrounded by a drag show where performers and audience members would get to question the candidates, and Athenians for Bodily Autonomy jumped on it. They saw it as a way to simultaneously boost turnout for issue 1, to oppose House Bill 245, and to make city politics more accessible and accountable to queer people. So they set up everything and invited me and Steve. I enthusiastically agreed, but he refused, and thereby prevented the event from happening. And what a missed opportunity. We could have attracted national media attention. We could have set such a positive example for the rest of the country. And if you read his reply, which was published in the Athens News, you'll see that he didn't even bother to give a reason for his refusal, just said he wouldn't do it, and that was that. So maybe in his closing statement, we might hear a reason tonight.
Thank you. The next question goes first to Mr. Crane. Provide examples of your civic engagement in this last year.
In this last year, so I'm primarily active with United Athens County Tenants. We've been working on a few things. Hopefully, in the past 3 years, we've got City Council to pass its most pro-tenant legislation in decades, and hopefully there'll be some more of that on the horizon soon. We've got some other projects that are hopefully coming to fruition as well very soon. One you can read about in today's Athens News. And, my focus in this election, again, has been to run for mayor in such a way that I do good regardless of whether I win. That's why I'm promoting issue 1 and 2 even before myself on all of my yard signs, promoting yes votes for them. That's why tonight I sent emails to about 100 different OU faculty members encouraging them to announce this event to their students and encourage their students to come and try to come up with assignments that were relating politics in this historic election to their curriculum. Looks like that didn't work out too well. But I keep trying because I think ultimately that's all we can do, is to try to protect our democracy by enlarging it and giving people more of a stake in local government by creating a local government that is more responsive to them.
I should probably just give you my Google Calendar, and you'll see how I've been engaged with the city's population. I mentioned, engaging with the Graduate Student Senate. Just the other night, I was engaging with the African Students Union. I've engaged with the Islamic Student Union. I engaged with the Undergraduate Student Senate. hey, go figure. I'm engaging right now by going door to door as I'm knocking on our citizenry and asking them what's of importance to you. And oh, by the way, I'm running for mayor, so please vote for me. My world is public engagement. That's what I do. I do it not only at the city level, I do it at the state level, I do it at the national level, to where my national and state work is to cast a positive light on the city of Athens and to have people recognize the really fascinating, good work that's going on right here. So again, the short of it is that I think the role of a mayor is to be civically engaged in all possible ways, not just sending emails out to faculty members or sending emails out to whatever. It's engaging by actually meeting people where they are. I'll go to farmers market and engage with people. What used to take me 30 minutes at farmers market takes me 2 hours. But that's called civic engagement.
All right. The next question goes first to Mr. Patterson. Have we done enough to advance racial justice since the historic 2020 protests against racist police violence? What more, if anything, should we do in Athens?
Well, as I indicated in my opening, we've been working with the National League of Cities, Race, Equity, and Leadership, and my city employees have all gone through racial equity training. The city auditor is sitting here, Kathy Heck. Kathy has gone through that training. Council has gone through the training. The law department, the law office has gone through the training. We also have a new DEIA coordinator or training coordinator for the city of Athens, Lacey Rogers, who now, after going through and providing a lot of the training, she's going through train the trainers. So as we're hiring and onboarding new employees, one of the first bits of training they're going to get is training on racial equity. What it means to be, a person who can recognize systemic racism and the impacts that that has on individuals within our own community. Racial equity, also engaging with the newly formed Athens Asian American Association or agency. It's a group that came out of COVID-19 when our AAPI community was starting to feel the negativity of people running around saying, "You're someone who brought the Wuhan virus onto us." I can't think of anything worse to do to any group of people than to sit there and pin a 100-year pandemic on them. And, again, training our people. Now Lacey Rogers' job is to be more public-facing.
Thank you.
So Council's June 2020 racial equity resolution called for a racial equity review of city operations and for new attention to be paid to matters of racial equity. 6 months later, my opponent rushed through passage of new police union contracts that had no new attention paid to racial equity. We have still not conducted the racial equity review. And I'm glad he brought up that National League of Cities training purchase. There's about the better part of 1,000 providers of such training in the US. Why was the NLC the only one considered? Was it because Mayor Patterson was simultaneously co-vice chair of the NLC Real Council that was selling the training, which made him both the buyer and seller as mayor? And why did council suspend its normal rules of having 3 readings over a 4-week period and multiple opportunities for media coverage and public comment, and instead reduce that to 91 seconds from first reading to passage of that purchase? Could it have been because 4 hours later, an application window opened up for the National League of Cities Board of Directors, and Mayor Patterson was able to apply with that $100,000 transfer to his own organization under his belt? I don't know. It sure doesn't look too good. But at the very least, we would hope that before we spend $100,000 on racial equity training, we do a racial equity review to figure out exactly what it's supposed to fix. And we never did that.
Thank you. The next question goes first to Mr. Crane. How will you embrace the business community for the sake of more employment and a unified community?
So this is always a funny one for me as a socialist and a child of small business owners and an occasional small business owner myself. My biggest role in this was organizing and then being elected president of the Athens Mobile Vending Association back in 2017, 2018, 2019. I think that basically we should support small businesses in Athens. I think it's a good idea to kind of keep capital small and close by. It also gives more people to, work for themselves, escape alienated labor a little bit, hopefully not while subjecting too many employees to it. But yeah, I worked with the Mobile Vending Association to try to make it easier for restaurants to enter the market through mobile vending because there's less overhead than brick and mortar. And I think that, we should be promoting those kind of cultural and unique aspects of our community because I think things like our art scene, our culture scene, our unique food scene is a huge asset to us. It's like the cultural offerings of the university. And so, we've got all the outdoor rec in the Hocking Hills, but we can pull some of that tourism down here, I think, if we focus more on arts and culture and food.
Thank you.
Can you repeat the question?
Sure. How will you embrace the business community for the sake of more employment and a unified community?
My administration is constantly working with businesses that are looking at Athens to set up a business, set up a hospital. We have a new Marietta Memorial, actually it's Memorial Healthcare System out on Columbus Road that's building a 4-story hospital that it's going to be interesting. You'll see this thing go up in 25 days, give or take, because it's coming in as modules. But this is going to produce 160 new jobs here in the city of Athens with an average salary of $130,000 a year. Supporting initiatives like that, supporting small businesses. I've been at work with the Athens County Economic Development Council. We have a revolving loan fund. It's small. It's about $150,000. I have requested that is dedicated to minority or women-owned businesses at an extremely low interest rate for business development. I've been working with our black business leaders to find out where is the city falling short with being able to have levers that we can pull to help incentivize their development, whether it's expansion or new development here in the city of Athens. The Armory, when it's redeveloped, which is going to happen over the next 12 months, we're going to have space in there for young innovators to use the digital economy to be able to hopefully, rise and thrive when it comes to a digital commuter.
Thank you. This next question goes first to you, Mr. Patterson. What is your plan for city staff members' health care policies?
Well, that's a great question. Let me share a little story to that question. I was just engaging with one of our police officers who looked at me and he said, the best thing that we have going on in our city with our city employment is our health care that we offer to all of our workers, to all the employees for the city. So much so that we're hearing other organizations, other workers elsewhere in the city going, maybe I need to sit and look at some of these positions that open up in the city of Athens with the city government and get hired on for that benefit. Where we really get challenged, unfortunately, is finding people who want to fill vacancies within our police department. Our fire department is doing much better. And one of the things that we always kind of talk about is how can we get the word out to a 24-year-old, 25-year-old that we have a great benefits package? Because they're not thinking that way, unfortunately. But if we can monetize it and go, your salary is this, but it's really this if you take into account your healthcare benefits that you have within the city. So I personally don't see any improvement to the healthcare. What I do see is that it becomes an attractant for new employees here in the city of Athens.
I don't have anything to add on that one.
Okay. Then we will go to the next question, which will be to you first, Mr. Crane. What is your plan for street repairs and improvements?
I think that the city has made some strides. And I think, we shouldn't just be talking about streets, we should be talking about sidewalks. There's been a lot of progress made on that front lately. I think that's all for the better. But yeah, I mean, we've obviously had some problems in the past. Stimson Avenue had some problems, went on for a lot longer than was hoped. And some of the grades were a problem. I think the planners that were just these open pits for people to trip and fall in for months were a problem. I think there have been some other odd things that have gone on with parking, like the diagonal parking spots on College Street. I think those are pretty disastrous. Yeah, I mean, I don't think I have any real insight to add here. I think I have the experiences that most community members have had, frustration with how some projects have played out. I think, as my opponent very accurately said, neither of us have all the answers. It's important to listen to folks. And, I recognize that I don't have a strong opinion on every issue. And I've got strong opinions on parking enforcement, but less so on street repair.
Well, the city does have a large focus on city infrastructure, not only street repairs and sidewalk repairs, but also the invisible infrastructure, our water and sewer. I will tell you that the city of Athens has been successful in bringing in over $6 million in state and federal funding for roadways and underground infrastructure since 2016 up to the present. The beauty is that we are now looking at, from 2023 out to 2027, $11.9 million in state and federal funding coming in for infrastructure projects to include enhanced roundabouts. One of the big things, a lot of people joke about roundabouts. Oh, I hate roundabouts and so on and so forth. Here's the thing to think about. If you're truly a community that wants to decarbonize yourself and be a better steward of the planet, to have a roundabout where you're not idling for 10 minutes, that's long. Even 5 to 6 minutes idling there, you are just belching out carbon emissions, which is not helpful to our environment. And so we're going to build another roundabout in the future. We're going to replace the road or the bridge surface for the Stimson Avenue bridge. We have a lot of things in the hopper when it comes to improving. And as Damon Crane said, sidewalks. We've got a big initiative to get sidewalks repaired to where they're ADA accessible, and that there are more sidewalks for people to easily commute from place to place.
Thank you. The next question goes to you first, Mr. Patterson. Do you think there is a deer problem in the city of Athens? If so, what would you do to solve it?
Oh, Madam Moderator. Yes. We live up on Longview Heights, and so we're right on the edge of the city. And in our own backyard, there's a herd of 10 to 15 deer that come through. I personally enjoy watching them from my back deck. I know there are others who do not. I know that they can be a real serious issue with deer crossings within the city and outside. Short of culling the herd, it is a problem. It's not only deer. I'm getting complaints a lot from people who use the bike path and say, there's goose poop everywhere. And then there's goose that chase me down when I'm riding my bike or trying to walk on the bike path. So it's a multifaceted issue, but you got to stop and think about this. We live on the edge of the Hocking Hills. We live right here in the only state forest area of the name that I'm not going to use, Ohio State, our national forest, to where there's wildlife all over the place. Managing it, I don't have a solution other than being more cognizant that we've got a lot of wildlife out there.
I like deer. There's a deer that takes a nap next to my back porch every day. It's really pleasant to watch it. I grew up in this part of the country, so I'm pretty accustomed to dodging deer on the highways. If there is a real public safety concern, that's one thing. I'm open to looking at evidence of that. But if deer are nibbling on some folks' flowers, I think that's okay. Squirrels dig up my flowers all the time. I still like to watch squirrels. I'm not trying to kill them. There's been some discussion on the West Side Facebook page about whether hunting should be allowed within city limits. I think that's a bad idea, as I think most people do. But yeah, I mean, I think that if there's a real public safety concern, it's one thing. Otherwise, I'm fine with deer doing their own thing and enjoying watching them from time to time.
Okay. Mr. Crane, this next question is to you first. What would be your approach to the Mayor's Partnership for Progress?
That is not an issue I have a strong opinion on.
Well, in full disclosure, I'm the president of the Mayor's Partnership for Progress, so I should probably say that out front. The Mayor's Partnership for Progress is an amazing collaboration of mayors and village and city managers from 19 Appalachian counties, to where we're constantly sharing challenges, but we're also working together to help each other, solve issues that they have. We have become so strong of late that even at the state level, they recognize the power of the Mayor's Partnership for Progress, so much so that there's another large organization called the Ohio Mayors Alliance that is started as the 30 mayors from the 30 largest cities in the state of Ohio that got together and helped lobby, advocate for big city issues. And the Mayor's Partnership for Progress, and primarily me, sat there and said, you're missing an entire quarter of the state of Ohio's voice by not having MPP have a representative at the Ohio Mayors Alliance. We lobbied with former Mayor Nan Whaley, who's amazing. She said, yeah, the voice is missing from Southeast Ohio, and they appointed me to be that spokesperson to go up to Columbus to sit there with the mayors from the bigger cities, but also bearing in mind that Mayor's Partnership for Progress, we represent 120 municipalities and over 800,000 citizens within those 19 counties. That would rank us as the second largest municipality in the state of Ohio. And I'm proud that I'm a part of that, because I am able to sit there and go toe-to-toe with the Lieutenant Governor and the Governor when it comes to issues that are deserved down here in Southeast Ohio.
Thank you. Don't get too far from the mic, Mr. Patterson, because the next question goes to you first. Excuse me. Our city population is about 24,000 people, but fewer than 2,800 votes were cast in the 2019 mayor's race. Is such low voter turnout a problem? And if so, what have you done to fix it?
Well, we're 23,849 to be exact. And yes, it does sound like a low voter turnout. The one thing that we don't have information on is the student body. How many of them are voting wherever it is their permanent address is? This kind of goes back to my opposition's question or point about the percentage of people who are not being engaged. How do we know they're not engaged? How do we know they're not voting in Columbus, Cincinnati, Dayton, Cleveland, Maslin, Zanesville? Name a municipality, because there's a very small fraction of students at Ohio University that are from Athens or from Athens County. The vast majority are coming from elsewhere in the state or border states. We don't have a clue as to how many that are from Pennsylvania, Indiana, Kentucky, West Virginia. How do you know that they're not voting in their home municipality or voting absentee in their home municipality. So I think it's a real fallacy to sit there and say that a large percentage of our population is not engaged to vote. I don't think that's being fair to the student body at Ohio University, quite honestly, undergraduate or graduate student. So, that's all I have to say about that.
Mr. Crane.
Well, if they're not voting here, they're not engaged here. I don't think it's preferable to have students voting where at most they live 3-4 months out of the year instead of where they live 8 months out of the year. If we want people more involved in the decisions that affect their lives, we obviously want them involved where they are spending most of their lives. So this is always the kind of Weasley way to get out of low student turnout. Well, we don't know. Maybe they vote somewhere else. If they're voting somewhere else, that's not a good thing. This is where students live. This is where they're affected by housing policy, by parking, by towing, by policing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The vast majority of their lives for 4 or 5 years. Of course we should be trying to engage them in this community. But again, if we want to be having the biggest impact possible, we also want to be sure that they're voting. We don't want to not know and say, oh, maybe they're voting somewhere else. We want to know they're voting because it's reflected in our turnout statistics. So, yeah, I think the whole idea that, oh, they might be voting somewhere else, well, if they are, they're still not engaged in this community's city governance.
Thank you. We now will finish with our questions from the audience and move to closing statements. Each of you will have 2 minutes for your final remarks, and we will begin with Mr. Crane. We'll begin with you.
Well, I guess I get to be the bad guy again. Fact, my opponent switched careers from professor to politician after an OU ethics investigation found he obtained tenure on the basis of a bogus CV. Fact, when I ran against him in 2019, I argued code enforcement was stretched too thin to adequately enforce safety standards in rental housing, so he responded by lying about the key facts of the matter for the next 5 months, repeatedly telling the Athens News the city employed twice the number of rental housing inspectors it actually employed, and that they were responsible for conducting just half of their actual workload of inspections. Only after the paper finally pressed him on the first number did he retract that lie. He never retracted the second lie. In 2021, the Democratic mayor got caught trying to secretly boost Republican turnout against independent progressive city candidates, even though increased Republican turnout would also hurt Democratic congressional candidate Allison Russo, whom Patterson had publicly endorsed. As I mentioned earlier, fact, a 2022 investigation by United Athens County tenants found that landlord Joe Kraus failed 110 of his last 113 regular inspections, frequently dodged inspections by failing to show up for them, and that some of Kraus's properties had gone as long as 8 consecutive years without showing evidence of code compliance. Yet not only did my opponent's administration continue to issue new rental permits, he twice appointed him to the city zoning board where Kraus could help make housing policy decisions for the city. Fact, for the past year, investigators at the Ohio Ethics Commission have been collecting evidence to determine whether my opponent should be charged with a felony for unlawful interest in a public contract over the National League of Cities purchase we mentioned earlier. Fact, I'm about out of time, but if my opponent would like the opportunity to respond in depth for more than 2 minutes, I once more invite him to participate in a second candidate forum, this time hosted by OU students and held on campus. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Patterson, it's your turn for a closing statement.
Thank you. Clearly, there's some alternative universe out there and alternative truths. Look, for me, it's so easy to have non-results-based negative hyperbole jammed into a 2-minute soundbite. That's easy. You know what isn't easy? Being a strong leader. Being a strong leader, my track record shows that I have been a strong leader for the city of Athens for 8 years. I'm really proud that my wife and daughters are here today to really kind of see the way civics works when it comes to civil dialogue versus uncivil dialogue. My approach has always been to meet people where they are, to engage them, to have the citizenry help solve problems here in the city of Athens, because the mayor's role is not to sit there and dream up solutions all day long. That's a fallacy. I will continue to engage with the population, and at the end of the day, I'm asking for your vote on November 7th for my next 4 years. Thank you. Thank you to the League of Women Voters, again, for always hosting a great forum. Thank you to my rock, Connie Patterson, and my two amazing daughters, and all my friends that are here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you both. I'd like to close this forum by thanking both candidates for their participation in our democratic process. I would also like to extend our thanks to the City of Athens Government Channel staff, including Ryan Schwartzoff and Jason Dudas, for recording this event. This recording will be viewable on the City of Athens YouTube channel and its Facebook page, the League of Women Voters of Athens County Facebook page, and will be replayed on the government channel 1024. And finally, I want to thank the people of Athens County for submitting so many thoughtful questions and for joining us to learn more about these two candidates. We urge all of you to make a voting plan now. Check your voter registration at voteohio.gov to make sure it is up to date. Early in-person voting begins October 11th, and Election Day is November 7th. Thank you all, and have a good night.